Thanks everyone for joining us today. This is the second session that we have of this webinar because this topic is quite complex, and you will find many different types of scenarios that you will be interpreting about. And I'm aiming to help you to feel more confident around these scenarios. In my previous webinar, I mentioned a little bit about the difference between the education, health, and care plan and individual education plan. The education, health, and care plan, it doesn't involve only the school. It also involves the NHS and social services. The social services are not involved necessarily because a child is neglected, but because the social workers, they are very good at helping to organize services for a child of young person. This plan, it's relevant for children or young people that have additional needs for learning, or it could be a disease or disabilities. This applies to any person that is younger than 25 years old. It is reviewed every year, and that's where the meetings take place. That it's normally at the school, but there are many specialists that attend. When a parent requests an education, health, and care plan, it's not always approved, and it can be very stressful for your client in case they have to appeal, which is possible to do. Not every disabled child is awarded an education, health, and care plan, and it's the local authority that it decides about the funding. This is to their discretion. Some children, they might have a section 23 that is assessed by the social work department. They have a child disability team. But in some cases, they might say that the child is not disabled enough, or even in some cases that the child is not neglected, which is not particularly fair, because this is a disability act that is not always enforced. There are areas to be assessed. For example, many autistic children, they will need to have their sensory needs met at the school, and that's why a long time, a long part of the curriculum, it's based on meeting those sensory needs. For example, my son used to have yoga. They do a therapy that's called sensory enrichment therapy. And well, all the specialists are assisting the school. The occupational therapists are really good to suggest equipment. It could be many things that are taken into consideration to write the education, health, and care plan. The NHS is highly involved. The pediatrician keeps checking on how the child is developing. And what is very useful is that they tend to go to the school quite a lot. The child and adolescent mental health services are not always involved. It's necessary to have a referral. And this could be, for example, when there are many behavioral issues that might affect the behavior of the child at the school, and this might have an impact on the learning. the speech and language therapist, what they do is that they involve the parent quite a lot. They recommend this book because the parent is the person that knows the child best. And this book, it's based on a program that's called the Hanem program. And they recommend the parent to sit with the child on the ground and get interest about what the child likes. For example, it could be Lego, because it's very normal that an autistic child won't acknowledge the parent. That used to happen to me. I applied this program, and there was one day that suddenly my son invited me to play with him. And the reason why they do this is this because playing it's a very important part of the development and to initiate communication. Another thing that they recommend is to encourage a child to blow bubbles. And the reason for this, it is because a nonverbal person might need to strengthen the facial muscles that are not used, because that might favor the speech production. Some children, they will never develop speech, and this is not caused by selective mutism, or it's not a problem in the vocal cords. It's simply that the brain doesn't develop in that way. And in that case, the speech and language therapist and the teachers, they will use other methods of communication that we will go through them right now. For example, one of them, it's Makaton. Makaton respects quite a lot the British Sign Language. And well, this is a slide with some of the signs. The problem with this system, it is that a child will be able to communicate only with someone else that knows Makaton. And there are about 100,000 users worldwide. The special education needs school, they teach this. They used to teach this quite a lot, but I think at the moment it's a little bit outdated. They are teaching different methods. Another thing that they use quite a lot, it's these visual aids. Why is this? It's because autistic people are visual learners, and they like to keep their lives predictable. And these sites are very useful to show a person what happens first and what happens next. Another method is sign along, that it's a modified British Sign Language. And why it's modified and how is it different? BSL, it's used for people with a hidden impairment. They don't have any learning disability or intellectual disability, so it's easier for them. I think that this method can be a little bit confusing, because, for example, if you see the please and thank you, it's the motion of the hand. It's in a different way. For example, please is this, and thank you is outward. But for example, the school taught my son this, and it was very confusing for him, because I believe that he doesn't understand please as a word. He thought that it's more like, if I doing this, I get what I want. He didn't really understand the meaning of the word. This system, it's the children have a folder with Velcro, and there is a bar, so they create a phrase, for example, and when they are ready, they hand this into the other person. it is based on a very good book that's called Verbal Behavior. The problem with this system it is that it's a little bit impractical because as the vocabulary widens, the parent will have to print more signs. And the school they welcome the parents because they print the pictures and they laminate them. But again, it's quite abstract because you can appreciate that these are drawings. For example, my son, he's very literal. He wouldn't understand uh, these drawings because they are very abstract for him. So that's why I prefer another method that it's an app for the iPad that it's called Proloquo to Go, that it also talks and I can upload real pictures. So it's a system that it's a lot better for him because ultimately it's the child that's going to decide the method of communication that they like. I had problems with a previous school because they were trying to impose this system, and I was explaining to them why this method wasn't suitable for my son, and they kept insisting. Then they were mixing with sign along, which it was incredibly confusing for him. We didn't really make any progress, but it works for other children. So it's the child that will decide what they want. This program it's really good. It is to create social stories. For example, my son goes to a class where there are other peers that are verbal, and because he can speak, I can make a story about what he did on his holidays. And he would play the start button, and he can share the pictures. There is a service that they gave me an iPad because the child should have an iPad that is exclusive for communication. My son has another iPad for playing and to watch videos, and has the other one that is exclusive for communication. These apps are quite expensive. The Proloco to Go, I think it costs something between 500 and 700 pounds. And I am not exactly sure about how much Pictello costs, but there was a service that funded all this for my son. Another way that the NHS can be involved is through the CAMS, because many autistic children have this eating disorder that's called RFID. That it's quite new. There is an ongoing research about this because it's an eating disorder that, unlike bulimia and anorexia, it has nothing to do about the person wanting to lose weight or or caring about the way they look. There are several types. For example, avoidant. There is no interest in food whatsoever. Aversivity with because a person can have a fear of choking. And the NHS has been incredibly helpful with this because my son goes to a special school and there are disability nurses there, and they are constantly monitoring my son's weight and his height. There was a time where he would eat only fruit and milk, and they are constantly encouraging him to try new foods. For example, that approach that's called 32 steps to eating. It is to expose the child to new types of food, but in a way that won't distress them. To get familiar with the smells, with the texture. The nurses from CAMS they came to my home to teach me how to do this, introducing 5 types of food every time, and also trying to encourage the child to make healthier choices. And it was quite fun because they were playing with food, and they might bring a speech and language therapists that are really good engaging the child, and they play with the food. It was quite fun. If you are ever interpreting in an assignment like that, where they show the parent how to do it, it's quite fun. The camps also helps with challenging behavior, which is the hallmark of the son. ADHD also can cause a child to be impulsive. um, Positive behavior support, it's an approach to encourage positive behavior through positive reinforcement. It will never include any type of punishment. It simply rewards good behavior, and the aim it is to avoid um, restraining a child, for example, and to also assess and recognize triggers, because behavior serves a purpose. For example, a child could be misbehaving because they have a stomach ache, or they are tired, or hungry, or they might be triggered by the noise of a hand dryer in a public toilet. Um, it could be so many things. They can prescribe medication. The medication is not the pediatrician that prescribes it. It will be normally the psychiatrist. It will be a very last resort, because the medication has very bad side effects, and a child would need to be constantly monitored, and they don't like to be touched. My son was on a type of medication for ADHD that caused his blood pressure to rise, and he wouldn't let the doctors to take his blood pressure, and then yes, the hyperactivity lessened, but it was because he was unwell. He was falling asleep at the school, and the aim of his medication was to stop the behaviors from interfering with his learning, but he was falling asleep. And then another downside of the ADHD medication, it is that it can suppress the appetite, and autistic children, they already have many issues with these, and because they would concentrate better, the medication could increase the repetitive behaviors. So I ended up opting for managing the hyperactivity with physical activity, and the school helps with this. My son's class, they go for a walk. They walk a mile every day, because physical exercise can reset the brain. It's quite amazing. The individual education plan, it's aimed to support a child that has special needs, but also could be other children, for example, that have English as a second language, or if a child that is a young carer for a family member that has a disease. It doesn't necessarily has to be a disability, and you will see that there is additional support for learning, and additional support for learning. It's a broader term, while ASN would be for children that have disability. These goals are reviewed every year, and if you might be interpreting at very big meetings, such as the child planning meeting and young person planning meeting. The occupational therapist is involved as well with the school, and they might attend the meetings. They are very good at recommending equipment For example, my son used to grind his teeth, and they immediately assessed the risk because he could break his teeth. I gave him something to chew on. Um, they recommend toys as well because autistic children might not be interested in toys. They might be interested about objects that are not meant to play with. And if you are ever interacting with an occupational therapist, they might go to the family home to assess the risks because children with disabilities and autism, they might be impulsive, destructive, and they need to assess that the home is safe enough. They recommend, for example, a special furniture that can be anchored to the wall, locks to keep cleaning products and medication away. Also, they can assist with a wheelchair. Some children are in wheelchairs or in strollers that are for older children for their own safety because they might run away and they have absolutely no sense of road safety, for example. And another reason could be the fact that they have some gross motor skills problems. Some children have some problems to walk, um, and and as well as other children, they walk on the tip of their toes, which is a sensory issue. The child planning meeting, there will be a lot of specialists attending. The head teacher normally will be taking notes. I think a good idea would be to ask for briefing and to get the names of the person that will attend to this meeting, and their job titles, because it could be physiotherapist, occupational therapist, speech and language therapist, psychiatrist, psychologist, and the parent. When I used to go to these meetings, I had a therapist working with my son. I had an applied behavior analysis therapist, and the music therapist. He wanted to come as well. There was a time that the psychiatrist was attending because we were considering medication and the school was opposing, because the behavior of my son was a concern at the time. He was a danger to himself and to others, and actually they had to put a special security measure for him, exclusively for him at the school, because he used to figure out all the logs, and he was engaging in dangerous behaviors. The young person planning meeting, I think, well, normally it would be more relaxed. And why is this? Because the child was supported throughout the years. Uh, right now, at this moment, I speak with the teachers and the speech and language therapist, because there are no many concerns with my child at the moment. But there are some cases where there are young people that they attend mainstream school, and because there is something that they don't like, they might refuse to attend. And this is a problem because by law, a child needs to be at school. So there could be assignments that you might take part in linked to that. Young people that are refusing to go to school, and it's necessary to put a plan in place. Some charities and social workers, they actually come to the family home to take the child to the school to make sure that they get there. And it is very likely that at these meetings, especially if a young person, it's verbal, you might be interpreting for the as well for this person, because their views are considered. Um, these meetings also can be for people that aren't at school. Some vulnerable young adults, they live in supported accommodation. And I did have assignments of this type. And in that case, it would be good if you could know about what this person likes, and you have a little icebreaker that it doesn't need to be a long chat. It is just to make them to feel comfortable around you, and you wouldn't be breaking any code of conduct for doing this. And it's very rewarding because the social services, they call me in several occasions, because they told me, oh, this person feels comfortable with you, because autistic people and people with disabilities, they like their lives to be predictable. And if you are a familiar face, and they like you, they will call you again for these meetings. This is a book that I highly recommend. I'll explain why. In the meetings, there will be a lot of people. It's not the same thing to interpret for 2 3 people than 8, for example. And for a parent, it might be upsetting to talk about the difficulties that they are experiencing, barriers to get the support that's needed. I was very lucky to be introduced to this book when I was training as an interpreting in Edinburgh College. Because I normally, yes, I don't interrupt the parents. I let them talk. You need to develop your own system, and it needs to be something that works for you. I normally write key terms, because I have a very good memory, and I don't need to take a lot of notes, but this will be depending on the person. Another type of assignment that you might have, it's when people are applying for benefits. Personal independent payment is being replaced in Scotland. It's going to be called adult disability payment. And well, there are two parts: the daily living part and mobility part. You might be helping a person to apply for this. It's a very long form, and it focuses rather about how the disability or the disease affects the person, rather than the disease itself. So I don't think that you will find a very complicated terminology for this. And this is for people age 16 and over. And well, it's under the Department for Working and Pensions. It's no means tested, which means that, for example, a person could work and still get this. And yes, it is for people over 16 years old. Then the carers allowance, it is for parents or carers that a lot of people need to give up work to look after a loved one that has a disability or a disease. It needs to be an ongoing issue, and the person needs to get a DLA or PIP. The DLA, it's like the PIP but for children. It's called Disability Living Allowance, and same. It has care rate, and that could be middle, low, high, and the person needs to get DLA or PIP for this carer to get the carer's allowance. That it's very little money. It is about £76 a week, and they can work, but I believe that the limit that a person can earn a month, it's about £500, 520, something like that. That some carers work. I do this. It is to complement my income, because really it's very little to live on. And well, the disability living allowance, it's been replaced as well in Scotland. It is called child disability payment, and it's not going to be under the Department for Working and Pensions in here. It's going to be under Scottish Social Security. Well, thanks very much for your attention. I'm leaving my email address in case you need to ask me any questions. We will be sharing the slides. I'll pass over to AIT.